Now, what I did in the 12th planet, and maybe that is the reason for its success and for its still being so powerfully around, is that I brought to life a civilization that was hardly known before, and that is the Sumerian civilization. So I brought to life the Sumerian civilization, which was really a most amazing civilization. It blossomed out in what is now southern Iraq. So about 6,000 years ago, an incredible civilization appeared there, and all those that deal with it use such words as suddenly, unexpectedly, out of nowhere, because there was no gradual or any kind of precedential civilization that you had this and this and this, and this was a higher level, a higher stage. Suddenly, from what we may call primitive, though they were not primitive people, but they were farmers, hunters, etc. But suddenly there appeared cities, high-rise buildings, societal organization, kings, priests, codes of law, literature, art, music, musical instruments, all of that within a very short period, appeared about 6,000 years ago. But I want to mention tonight at least three of their firsts. One is writing. They developed a writing system called cuneiform, where the scribe using a stylus would make wedge-like symbols or indentations in wet clay, which when it dried would become a permanent record. But let's say that this is a clay tablet, and I once held up a copy of my book, not this one, this is a DVD, and I said, which one of the two do you think would last another 1,000 years? The printed book or the clay tablet? And the answer is the clay tablet. So we have writing, which of course meant a language and grammar and literature and epic tales, and lullabies were written down, recipes. So writing was one of them. Another thing was pictorial depictions. They took stones, mostly semi-precious stones, and made cylinders about an inch or so, sometimes longer, but basically about an inch, a cylinder of an inch, and would engrave, and nobody has figured out to this day how, in this hard stone, they would make an engraving in reverse, like a negative, which when rolled on wet clay would become a permanent depiction, the way we say print our presses, the rotary presses now, the newspapers. And the third thing that I would like to mention and stress this evening was the high-rise buildings. They were the first to use bricks and to build high-rise buildings, like stage pyramids that would rise 100, 120, 160 or more feet high. Some think that these were the towers of Babel, mentioned in the Bible. Actually, it's not so, but every major city, Sumerian city, had a sacred precinct, and the sacred precinct had such a ziggurat, as they were called. And they were used primarily for astronomical observation. And indeed, their knowledge of astronomy, or in the field of astronomy, is one of the most amazing Sumerian legacies. This is, for example, the imprint of a cylinder seal. You can actually see the seal in Jerusalem. There's a museum there called Bible Lens Museum. And this is, if you ask a regular scholar, what is it? They'll show it. He'll say this is a beer drinking scene, because the Sumerians were also the first to invent beer. And drinking beer was a social event. You can see people are coming to participate in that, and beer was drunk through a straw. The way I understand in, say, in Latin America or in Argentina, they drink mate tea with a straw. But as many other cylinder seals, they were decorated with celestial symbols. And if you study this one, you find out that it depicts the sun, it depicts the earth and its moon, it depicts what we call the asteroid belt, which is a belt orbiting between Mars and Jupiter, and nobody knows, or nobody, I mean, I say nobody because I do. Others claim they don't know how it came about. It's the remains of some planet that was destroyed, exploded, except that if a planet explodes, the pieces fly in all directions, and in this case, they orbit like a belt between Mars and Jupiter. So you also have Mars and Jupiter. Here's Jupiter. You have the asteroid belt, which we have discovered only in modern times. And beyond Jupiter, you have Saturn and its rings, which we did not know about until the invention of the telescope. Now, this cylinder seal is from about 2000 BC, from 4,000 years ago. So this is an example of the amazing Sumerian knowledge in astronomy. But there is even one more amazing cylinder seal, which caused quite an uproar at the museum where it's kept. It's in a museum in Berlin at the time when I came across its existence. It was East Berlin, but they cooperated with me. They sent me a photograph. And if you ask scholars what is the scene depicted, they say, well, this is the god of agriculture granting the plow, a primitive plow, to mankind. A representative of mankind is introduced by a lesser god to the main god who grants the plow. And just as an aside, I'll say, so you tell those same scholars at the museum or in any of their scientific magazines, say, so there was a god of agriculture and that's how you look. They say, no, that's a mythological scene. That's just mythology. But whatever it is, there is an interesting celestial depiction on this one, and this is what it shows. It shows a star surrounded by planets. Now, this arrow is my addition to enable comparison with our knowledge of the solar system. So we have the sun, not the earth, we have the sun in the center, surrounded by planets, all the planets we know of, in the correct sizes and in the correct order, except that here there is one more planet, right here, between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt is now. So according to the Sumerians, there was a planet there, probably, or one must conclude, the planet which apparently broke up somehow. Now, if you could get hold of Sumerian guy and said to him, what planet was that and what is the somehow, how did that planet break up? He'll say, well, that's you're asking me something that is been written about in one of our books. It happens to be a clay tablet, not the way we think of books. And that tablet is actually part of 7 tablets. And once they were discovered in a library in northern Mesopotamia, in an ancient library in northern Mesopotamia, and the contents of that story on those tablets was deciphered. They have since been referred as the 7 tablets of creation, paralleling the biblical tale of the 7 days of creation, 6 days of actual creation, and then 1 day in praise of the Creator. So this is one of the tablets, I think the 4th one out of the 7, known as the Epic of Creation, or sometimes known by its opening lines, which is how the Sumerians used to name their epic tales or their tablets in library catalogs, because they were actually set in libraries, and on each shelf there was a tablet that listed all the texts that are on that particular shelf, like a catalog tablet. So no, it's not sometimes known by its opening words, Enuma Elish. Now, what does the Enuma Elish say? The Enuma Elish tells the story how the Earth came to be, how our moon came to be, how that extra planet came to be, and indeed how the whole solar system came to be. And they say that once the solar system began to coalesce, the way our modern scientists say, around our sun, and the various planets began to form, an invader, another planet, thrust out of some other solar system, passed near ours, but as it passed near our solar system, it began to be pulled in by the gravitational pull of all those other planets and changed course. Now you will notice an interesting thing, that while all the other planets rotate in one direction, which is counterclockwise, as we say, this one orbits in the opposite direction, which being unusual is called retrograde. But as it was drawn in the opposite direction, inevitably it collided with one of the olden planets in our solar system, which in the Enuma Elish text is called Tiamat. And this planet, the invader, which later was named Nibiru, acquired various satellites or moons as it was passing by the other planets. Tiamat, which is treated as a female celestial entity, had 11 satellites, one of them quite large, unusually large, called in the tale Kingo. And when they clash finally occurred. It referred to, in those texts, as the celestial battle. Tiamat was hit twice, actually. This is just one of the drawings from my books. Was hit by some of the moons, the satellites of the invader, and was broken up. Half of it became bits and pieces, the asteroid belt, which those texts, and the Bible in chapter 1 of Genesis refers to as the hammered bracelet, because it orbits like a bracelet around the sun. And the other half was thrust into another orbit, carrying with it Tiamat's largest moon to become our planet Earth and its satellite, the moon, an unusually large one as things go in our solar system. And now, what happened to the invader? According to the Enuma Elish, the Epic of Creation, the invader itself became a member of the solar system, a 12th member, because they counted the sun, the earth, its moon, and not 9 but 10 planets. Now, on many Sumerian and afterwards Assyrian, Babylonian, and so on depictions, all the 12 members of the solar system are depicted, and you can see the sun, you can see the moon, you can see this Nibiru, whose symbol became the winged disc. You can see all the others with their symbol, and you can see the 7 dots, which is the symbol for Earth. Now, you may well say this is wrong, because we all know that Earth in New Age parlance is the third rock from the sun, right? So there's Mercury, Venus, and Earth. And that is true. But if the Sumerian incredible knowledge was given them, was not acquired by them from their own observations without telescopes and all other modern equipment, if it was given them by somebody, let's assume for the moment, coming in from outside the solar system towards Earth, then they would say Pluto is the first. And then there's Neptune and Uranus. And then there's Saturn and Jupiter. And Mars would be the 6th planet. And Earth would be the 7th planet. So Earth is quite correctly depicted by the symbol of the 7 dots, the number 7. And this is something I would like you to keep in mind as we proceed with this presentation, because it is very significant towards an appreciation of the evidence from the past about the future. Now, the obvious question that anyone, including myself at the time that I started to research and investigate all that, would ask himself is, how could possibly the Sumerians know all that, that the sun is in the center, and that's how this solar system came into being, and there was an invader, and the invader has this great elliptical orbit, etc. And the answer again, it is written down on, they are not called tablets, they are called cylinders, square cylinders in this case. And this one in particular, another one like it, can be seen by any one of you if you go to England, to Oxford, to the Ashmolean Museum. And this is called the Sumerian King List. And it says that about 430,000 years before the deluge, people called Anunnaki, in this text, called Anunnaki, came from their planet and visited Earth and brought civilization to Earth. In fact, it says, this and other records like it, say that civilization was brought down, and the term used in the Sumerian for the civilization is kingship. That kingship was brought down first time before the deluge and was brought down to earth from the heavens the second time after the deluge. And then there are tales, very detailed tales, telling us that at one time a group of 50 Anunnaki, led by a leader whom they call Enki, came from their planet, that same planet, the planet X or Nibiru. They came for a reason, they came for a purpose, and the purpose was that they needed gold. They needed gold with which to protect the dwindling atmosphere on their own planet. Now Enki stayed on Earth quite a long time, and at some point felt that he ought to tell his story of what happened on their planet that made him and his group and the other Anunnaki come to Earth, and what happened on Earth after they came and landed here. And there is an actual text known to any Sumerian or Assyriologist, as some call themselves, that they will say, yes, there is such a text that is an autobiography of Enki that starts by saying, when I approached the earth, I saw greenish marshes. We splash landed in the waters. We waded ashore. I commanded so-and-so, and the name is given, to test water and see if there's potable water. I commanded so-and-so to build us some kind of shelter. I commanded so-and-so to see if there is edible food. And so on, line after line in those tablets. Unfortunately, the complete text of that autobiography of Enki has not been found, only fragments of it. I used about 800 different sources to reconstruct the story of Enki, because I felt at some point in my own writings that it is not enough to tell the story of what happened here through the prism of the Sumerians, or to some extent the Old Testament, the Hittite writings, etc. But it is also important, especially to know why they came, what happened on their planet before they came, through the eyes and through the speech of one of them. And I chose Enki because he did dictate an autobiography. And the tale that emerges from all those sources is that after they landed here and could not get the gold just by extracting it from the waters of the Persian Gulf. This is the Persian Gulf, and this is today's Iraq. Another leader, a half-brother of his called Enlil, came. He was more a commander, and he was more a scientist. Another member of their family, they were all children of the ruler of Nibiru, called Anu. Another member, a female, who was a medical doctor, came and assisted also. And they set up a settlement, or actually 7 settlements on Earth. at a place that they called in Sumerian Edin, from which the word Eden, the Garden of Eden, comes. As I said, at some point the idea of extracting gold from the waters didn't work. They had to go and do it the hard way. So they kept coming in groups of 50 until there were some 600 of them on Earth. And they used Mars as a way station on which 300 of them were stationed. The numbers are given in those texts. But most of those on Earth, those Anunnaki, were assigned to mining gold in East Africa. And there are several texts, and in particular one known as the Atrahasis epic, that describe a time or an event where those working in the mines mutinied. And they said, no more. This is not the kind of work that we can do. We are astronauts. We are supposed to man spacecraft, not to work deep in the earth. And there was a mutiny, and there was great consternation among the leadership what to do. And then the same Enki, who was a scientist, said, we don't have to abandon our efforts to obtain the gold on which our own survival on our planet depends, because we have to protect our dwindling atmosphere with a shield of gold particles. Because there exists on Earth, already exists on Earth, a being which is in many ways similar to us. And all we have to do, and those are quotes from his words in his autobiography, all we have to do is put our mark on it, our genetic mark, and thereby raise that being more to our level so that it could follow our commands, understand our language, and do the work for us. And there are quite a number of texts called creation texts that describe how Enki, with the help of their half-sister, who was the chief medical officer, through trial and error, kept trying to combine their genes with the genes of the being that they found on Earth, which we may call Homo erectus, if we wish, and finally succeeded in bringing about what was called in those texts the perfect model. And it so happens that there is a cylinder seal, about 4,000 years old, showing this goddess, her name was Ninmah, raising the newborn model men, Lulu Amelu, as they called it. And she shouted, and these are words in those texts, my hands have made it. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, how we came about. This is the long story, which I gave you as briefly as I could, of what the Bible says in chapters 2 and others of Genesis, that a group called the Elohim, which is a plural term, literally meaning the lofty ones, translated God, said to each other, let us, in the plural, let us fashion the Adam. Adam comes from Adamah, which is earth, so Adam, literally earthling. Let us fashion the earthling in our image and after our likeness. And this is essentially, in one biblical verse, what the Sumerian tales tell in quite a number of creation texts. And then after they achieved that and everything seemed to be in order, the deluge came and destroyed everything. So after the deluge, there are tales, by the way, Sumerian tales describing the deluge and its reasons and its what caused it, and why was one God angry and said, "Let mankind perish," etc., etc. But that's needs another evening. So after the deluge, when the water subsided, they had to restruct and recreate and restart everything from the beginning, and they could not do it anymore in the Edin, today's Mesopotamia or Iraq, because it was all covered with millions, or now one should say billions, of tons of mud, and nothing could be done there until the earth would take generations and generations to dry. So they shifted the whole project from where it was. If you recall, it was this way. Everything was anchored on Mount Ararat, the twin peaks of Ararat, which stand out as a marker, and laid out exactly the same idea of a landing corridor this way. Now they used as one of the facilities to serve their purposes a great platform that they had built here and that survived the deluge, right here. And again, using this notion of equidistance from there to the spaceport, which was here and here, to create the whole landing pattern, they chose a new mission control center, a new place for the Duranki, right here. And this place is known today as Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, and I sometimes, either at seminars or when I took groups with me to tour these places, I would say to them, why is Jerusalem sacred? I say, well, it is sacred to Muslims because the tale is that Muhammad was taken from Mecca or Medina one night on a winged horse and brought to Jerusalem, and there he was taken aloft and visited heaven for one night. So that's. But why was Muhammad taken to Jerusalem? Why wasn't he lifted just from Mecca or Medina? Well, because that place was already known as a sacred place, because the Christians believed that that's where Jesus preached and was crucified, etc. So I said, so why was Jesus crucified in Jerusalem? He was born in Bethlehem. He came from Nazareth. Why Jerusalem? Well, because that's where the temple was. The Jewish temple, the Temple of Solomon. So why was the Temple of Solomon there? Well, people don't know. So I tell them, well, it was there because the same Anunnaki who had this pattern and had Nippur as the navel of the earth and mission control center before the deluge, set up this layout and made Jerusalem mission control center after the deluge. And equidistant from it is the spaceport and twin peaks, emulating the twin peaks of Ararat, twin peaks here in the Sinai Peninsula, and twin peaks, artificial ones, because there were no mountains there. So they built two mountains known as the Giza pyramids. Now, things did not go so well after the reconstruction and the setting up of the alternate mission control center. The Anunnaki, who, according to the tales by Enki and others, were engaged in almost constant wars on their planet, had at the time a leader called Anu, but he was actually a usurper. He usurped the throne. And under the Sumerian sexagesimal system of 6 times 10, 60, etc., he ranked as the top rank 60. And his successor was a son called Enlil, who was given the rank 50. But Enlil was not the firstborn son. It was Ea, or Enki, as previously known as Ea, Enki, who was really the rightful successor, but he was demoted to rank 40, and so on. So there was a pantheon of 12, matching the 12 members of the solar system, and matching other 12, without belaboring it, 12 months of the year, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples of Jesus, and so on. So 12 was a celestial number. So the relationships were such that the conflict was almost inevitable, especially since it had a lot to do of who was mothered by whom, who was the father, who was the mother. If this one was also the son of Anu and Antu, then he was this rank. But if this one was only the son of this one, but not this queen, he had another rank. So the relationship was quite confused and convoluted, and leading to conflict, which soon appeared on Earth. And one of the events that took place, not too many, relatively too many years after the establishment of that great pattern of landing pattern in Jerusalem and the Space Force, etc., and the 2 artificial mountains in Egypt, was that wars broke out. And the first war that I named in my book, The Wars of Gods and Men, the Pyramid Wars, because there was a series of them, had to do with these facilities, because in the Great Pyramid, one of the two especially, which is the only one that has an ascending passage and chambers, all the others have just a descending passage, they were a prize that one side tried to deprive from the other. And the first series of pyramid wars took place there. In that particular war, the two main protagonists were the main son of Enlil, called Ninurta, and the main son of Enki, called Marduk. And in that war, it was Ninurta who was the victor, and his victory was commemorated in some cylinder seals and other depictions. This was his symbol, the eagle, and this was his victory's depiction, how he won the war over the two pyramids, and another depiction where you see actually all three pyramids. And this, by the way, is another of the proofs, of which I have many, and I deal with it extensively, of who built the pyramids and when they were built, and that you see that already in Sumerian times, which preceded the pharaonic times by thousands of years, the existence of the pyramids was already known. In one of the next wars between the various clans of the Anunnaki, the Enlilites, the Enkyites, Ninurta, Marduk, etc., they resorted to the use of nuclear weapons. In 2024, almost 4,000 years ago, the Anunnaki resorted to the use of nuclear weapons. There is a long text called the Era epic, ERRA epic, that describes the reasons, who did it, how they did it, what the number of nuclear weapons that were used in 2024. The unintended consequence of that was that a wind blowing from the Mediterranean brought what they called in those texts, they're called lamentation texts, they called the evil wind that brought death to everything alive in Sumer. As the nuclear wind passed, reaching from the Sinai to Sumer, it did not destroy anything. The lamentation text lament that the stalls stand, but the animals that were there are all dead. The houses stand, but everybody who lived in the houses lies dead in the streets, on the roofs, etc. And that was the end of the great Sumerian civilization about 2024 BC. And in that one, unlike in the previous wars, where Ninurta, the son of Enlil, was the victor, Marduk, the son of Enki, was the victor, and that was the beginning of the rise of Babylon. Instead of Sumer and Enlil and all the others, it was now the era and the time of Marduk and the Babylonians. Now we are starting to leave ancient history, and we are starting, or I'm starting, to take you by the hand and lead you not only to the present but also to the future, and to understand where history is taking us when the dust, let's use that expression, the dust of the nuclear explosion and the demise of Sumer settled. Several hundred years later, when perhaps passage was possible again after the use of nuclear weapons here, a major event took place. It is called the Exodus of the Israelites from Egypt. And the Bible says that after about 400 years, God remembered. He said, oh, by the way, I forgot all about those people. There was this guy, Abraham, and I promised him a certain land, the promised land. I made a covenant with him. And then I forgot all about it. But now it's time to fulfill my promises. And the Israelites left Egypt, and I didn't write it yet in any of my books, but I can tell you now that if I ever do, I will tell you that the starting point of the Exodus was the Sphinx, because the Sphinx gazes precisely along the 30th parallel towards the spaceport. There was, of course, no more spaceport there, but the mountains remained, and the mountain which held the various facilities was there, and the Bible calls it Mount Sinai, the mount in the Sinai Peninsula, Har Elohim, the mountain of the gods, of the Anunnaki. And once they were, they had to continue. There was difficulty in going straight. They went around, but anyway, finally they got to Jerusalem. And what did they do once they got to Jerusalem? They built the temple to Yahweh on a platform that existed there. Now, at about the time that the Hebrews, the Israelites, were restoring the platform in Jerusalem, other things were happening in the adjoining countries, especially those countries that followed Marduk, the Babylonian one. In Babylonia, on cylinder seals, the sign of the cross began to appear. In Assyria, the kings began to wear the sign of the cross on their chest. The same happened in Egypt. Now these are all from around 1000 BC, 900 BC, 800 BC, 700 BC. Now what does it mean? What does it signify? Well, the sign of the cross, it may come as a surprise to my Christian friends, the sign of the cross is not a new sign, and not a sign developed or invented at the time of Jesus. This is a very ancient Sumerian sign, and each time that the planet Nibiru, that usually was depicted as a winged disk, was on its way back to our vicinity, each time that the reappearance of Nibiru was expected, the depiction, the symbolism for Nibiru, for the planet, changed from the winged disk to the cross. So this one, for example, this is one of the most ancient ones. This is another one. This is when agriculture was granted to mankind. And if you look at the orbit of Nibiru, roughly 3,600 years, so at some point the planet is here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here, and at some point the anticipation of its return begins. And that, I suggest, is when the sign of the cross began to reappear. In one of my books, The Wars of Gods and Men, I deal with all the various wars that took place, not only the very early ones, but in particular the ones that started to become more frequent and more ferocious as the return of Nibiru became closer and closer. It seems as if it became much more important who would be in control, who would welcome them, whose particular aspect of religion would be more predominant, etc. What caused the Anunnaki in 2024 BC to resort to the use of nuclear weapons? What was the problem? And the problem was that Marduk said that the age of the bull, the age of Taurus, which was the age of Enlil, is ending, he said, and my age, the age of the ram, the age of Aries, is beginning. He claimed that this is the correct zodiacal scale. So he said around 2200 BC, the age of Enlil, the age of Taurus, has ended, and my age, the age of Aries, has begun. The others, and this is all in those texts, by the way, the others said to him, no, you are wrong, because don't go by some chart. Look at the heavens. In the heavens, on the first day of spring, we are still in the age of the bull. We are still in the age of Taurus. Why? Because the three zodiacal constellations of the bull, of the ram, and of Pisces are not the same size. So, though Marduk claimed that his age has already begun, it was still observationally, really in the heavens, the age of Enlil. of his rivals, the Nurta and so on. So this was such a bitter fight that they resorted to nuclear weapons to deprive each other of the spaceport. Now, there is another cylinder seal. It is at the Hermitage Museum in Russia. There's no doubt about its date. It's 2500 BC. And it shows, in my opinion, without doubt, an astronaut on the sixth planet, which is Mars, greeting an astronaut on the seventh planet, which is Earth. You remember I asked you to keep it in mind, Earth and its moon. And between them, there is a spacecraft. So, a return of the Anunnaki with a stopover on Mars, one greeting the other, has occurred. And there is a date. There is a date on this cylinder seal. Do you see the date? Pisces. The age of Pisces. The age of Pisces. So does this mean that the return of the Anunnaki and the end of days with its 2160-year calculation will still come about this century? Maybe. Because, there is a because, ladies and gentlemen. Because just at the place that according to the New Testament is called Armageddon, where the final war will take place, a mosaic floor in the first church ever built in the Holy Land, in the time of Jesus, has on its floor the sign of Pisces. This was discovered 2 or 3 years ago at Armageddon, which really means in Hebrew Har Megiddo, the Mount of Megiddo, which is in Israel. Now, are all these omens, or is it just a tale to tell you a day? I don't know. I believe that these are omens.